I was sitting in the third row pew at St. Mark's Church on what seemed like an ordinary Sunday morning. Diane sat beside me, Lily between us, coloring quietly in her Bible activity book. The choir sang, sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, and everything felt perfectly normal. Then the double doors burst open. A woman I had never seen before stormed down the aisle, her face twisted with rage. She lunged at Diane, grabbed a fistful of her hair, and screamed a word that made my blood freeze homewrecker. My first thought was that some crazy person had wandered in off the street. But then I saw the anguish in her eyes, and something deep inside me whispered that maybe, just maybe, she knew something I did not. Before I tell you how a Sunday morning at church turned into the worst day of my life, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what I discovered after that scene will show you how quickly a perfect marriage can turn into a perfect lie. Now, let me take you back to 3 months before that church incident. My name is Carson Mitchell, and 3 months before that Sunday, I thought I had it all figured out. I was 33 years old, worked as a software engineer for a tech company in Austin, Texas, pulling in a comfortable six-figure salary. Diane, my wife of 7 years, was 31 and worked as a marketing manager for a real estate firm downtown. We had a beautiful 5-year-old daughter named Lily, a 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb with mature oak trees lining the street and 2 cars parked in our garage. On paper, we were living the American dream. Our weekends followed a comfortable pattern. Saturday mornings meant pancakes and cartoons with Lily. Afternoons were for soccer practice or trips to the park. Sundays we dressed up and went to church as a family, then had brunch at the diner on Maple Street, where Lily always ordered chocolate chip pancakes. Evenings were movie nights on the couch. Lily nestled between us with her stuffed rabbit. Our neighbors probably looked at us and saw the perfect family. Hell, I looked at us and saw the perfect family. But about 3 months before everything exploded, small things started shifting. Diane began staying late at the office more frequently. At first it was once a week, then twice, then 3 or 4 times. She would text me around 6 in the evening, saying a client meeting ran long, or she needed to finish a presentation. I would feed Lily dinner, give her a bath, read her bedtime stories, and wait up for Diane to come home around 9 or 10 at night. When she finally walked through the door, she seemed distracted, distant. She would kiss my cheek, quickly say she was exhausted, and head straight to the shower. Her phone habits changed too. Diane had always been casual about her phone, leaving it face up on the counter while she cooked, or letting Lily play games on it. But suddenly, it was always face down. Always. The screen would light up with notifications and she would snatch it up before I could see who was texting. When I asked who it was, she would say a coworker or a client. One night I noticed she had changed her passcode. We had always used the same one, Lily's birthday, but when I mentioned needing to check something on her phone, she hesitated before saying she had updated it for security reasons. Then there was her appearance. Diane had always been pretty, but she had never been particularly vain. Suddenly she was going to the gym 5 days a week instead of 2. She bought new clothes, tighter jeans, blouses cut a little lower than before. She changed her hairstyle, adding highlights that made her look younger. She started wearing perfume every day, even to run errands. I remember thinking it was great that she was taking care of herself, maybe going through a positive phase of self-improvement. I even complimented her, told her she looked amazing. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Our intimate life suffered. We went from making love twice a week to maybe twice a month. Every time I initiated, Diane had an excuse. She was too tired. She had a headache. She needed to wake up early. She had already showered and did not want to get messy. The rejections piled up, and I started to feel unwanted in my own marriage. But I told myself it was just stress from work, that every long-term couple went through dry spells. One Thursday evening, about 2.5 months before the church incident, Diane's company was throwing a cocktail party for their top performers. She had mentioned it casually a few days before. When I asked what time I should be ready, she looked confused. "Ready for what?" she asked. I reminded her about the party. She waved her hand dismissively and said it was just a small thing with coworkers, nothing fancy, and I did not need to bother coming. I felt a sting of rejection but did not push it. Maybe she wanted one night out with colleagues without her husband tagging along. She left the house at 7, wearing a black dress I had never seen before, heels that made her legs look endless, and that new perfume. She said she would be home by 10. 10 came and went. 11. Midnight. I texted her, asking if everything was okay. No response. Finally, at 1:15 in the morning, I heard her car pull into the driveway. I was sitting in the living room, trying to stay calm. When she walked in, she was slightly unsteady, claiming she had too much wine, but I did not smell alcohol on her breath. Her lipstick was gone, her hair was mussed, and her blouse had a small wrinkle near the collar, along with what looked like a faint lipstick smudge that was not her shade. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. She bristled immediately. "At the party? Where do you think?" I asked why she did not answer my texts. She said her phone died. I pointed out the lipstick mark. She looked down, frowned, and said one of her drunk coworkers must have hugged her too hard. Then she turned it back on me. "What is this, Carson? Are you interrogating me now?" It was the first real fight we had in 7 years. Voices raised, accusations flying, Lily's bedroom door cracking open upstairs, before I shushed Diane, and we both went silent. That night, lying in bed with Diane's back to me, I heard her phone buzz on the nightstand. Once, twice, 3 times. I glanced over and saw the screen light up with a notification. Just a letter. S. The messages preview was turned off. Diane reached out without turning over, grabbed the phone, and the buzzing stopped. I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding, wondering who S was. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that my wife of 7 years, the mother of my child, the woman I had pledged my life to, was not lying to me. So I pushed the doubts down. I told myself I was being paranoid. But the seed had been planted and it was starting to grow. 2 months before the church incident, I could not ignore the signs anymore. I started paying closer attention to the details Diane let slip. One Tuesday, she told me she had to drive to Dallas for a meeting with a potential client and would not be home until the next day. She said she would stay at a hotel near the convention center and be back Wednesday evening. I wished her safe travels, kissed her goodbye, and spent the evening with Lily making homemade pizza. Around 9 that night, I called Diane to say goodnight. She answered after a few rings, her voice cheerful. "Hey, babe," she said. In the background, I heard music voices, the unmistakable sound of a bar. "Where are you?" I asked. She said she was in the hotel lobby. They had a bar area, and she grabbed a drink after the long drive. I said, "Okay," and we chatted for a minute before hanging up. But something nagged at me. I opened my laptop and Googled the hotel she said she was staying at. I looked at photos of the lobby. There was no bar. There was a small business center and a breakfast area, but no bar. I told myself maybe she was at a restaurant nearby. Maybe I misheard, but doubt gnawed at me. The next day when she came home, I asked how the meeting went. She said it went great, very productive, the client was interested. I asked what hotel she stayed at. She repeated the name. I asked if the room was nice. She said it was fine, nothing special. I did not tell her I knew she was lying. The following week, I was going through our credit card statements to reconcile our budget. Diane and I had always been transparent about money, using a shared account for household expenses. As I scrolled through the charges, I noticed several that did not make sense. A steakhouse downtown bill for $283. A boutique hotel in the city center, $190. Another upscale restaurant, $156. I cross-referenced the dates with my calendar. On the day of the steakhouse charge, Diane had told me she was working late and grabbed a sandwich at her desk. On the boutique hotel date, she said she had back-to-back meetings and did not get home until 8. None of it added up. When I confronted her that evening, she barely glanced at the statement. She said those were client dinners, and the hotel was for an out-of-town associate the company was putting up. She said the charges would be reimbursed by her employer, but I checked the next 2 months of statements. No reimbursements ever came. I did not say anything more. I just nodded and went back to washing dishes. But inside something broke. I knew deep in my gut that Diane was lying to me. The question was, what exactly was she lying about? I did not want to believe the worst. I did not want to think my wife was capable of betrayal. But I also could not live in denial. I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. So I did something I never thought I would do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Gary Donovan. He was about 50 years old, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that blended into a crowd. He had been a cop for 20 years before retiring and starting his own investigation firm. We met at a coffee shop across town, where no one would recognize me. I slid an envelope across the table with photos of Diane, her work address, her car make and model, and our home address. I told him I suspected my wife was having an affair and I needed proof. Gary did not sugarcoat it. He said if she was cheating, he would find out, but I needed to be prepared for what that meant. Evidence in an affair case could get ugly. It could be used in divorce proceedings. It could hurt. I told him I understood. He said he would start surveillance immediately and report back in 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I went to work, came home, played with Lily, had dinner with Diane and pretended everything was normal, but inside I was dying. Every time Diane's phone buzzed, every time she said she had to work late, every time she smiled at me like nothing was wrong, I felt sick. At night I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if the woman next to me was a stranger. Finally, Gary called. He said we needed to meet in person. We went back to the same coffee shop. He slid a manila folder across the table. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were photos, lots of them. Diane walking into a high-rise apartment building downtown. Diane leaving the same building 2 hours later, her hair slightly disheveled. Diane and a man standing on the sidewalk, his hand on the small of her back. Diane and the same man in a restaurant leaning close over the table, laughing, and one photo that made my stomach drop. Diane and the man kissing in the front seat of his car. The man was tall, probably in his early 40s, with dark hair graying at the sides. He wore expensive suits and drove a luxury sedan. Gary had done his homework. His name was Stephen Lawson. He was the chief financial officer at a competing real estate firm, and he was married. His wife's name was Patricia. They had 2 young children ages 7 and 9. I stared at the photos until they blurred. 7 years of marriage, a child, a home, a life, and she had been lying to me. Not for weeks, but apparently for much longer. Gary said, based on the frequency of their meetings and the ease with which they interacted, this was not new. He estimated the affair had been going on for at least a year, maybe longer. I did not cry. I did not rage. I just felt numb, hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left me empty. Gary put a hand on my shoulder and said he was sorry. He told me I needed to think carefully about my next steps. If I wanted to file for divorce, this evidence would be critical. Texas was a no-fault divorce state, but proof of adultery could influence property division and custody. He advised me to consult a lawyer before confronting Diane. I paid. Gary took the folder and sat in my car in that parking lot for an hour. I thought about going home and throwing the photos in Diane's face. I thought about confronting Stephen Lawson. I thought about breaking down. But then I thought about Lily, my little girl who loved her mother, who did not deserve to have her world ripped apart by adult mistakes. And I realized something. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. I needed to be smart. I needed to protect my daughter and myself. So I decided to wait. I would gather more evidence. I would build an airtight case. And when the time was right, I would burn Diane's lies to the ground. For the next month, I played the role of the oblivious husband. I smiled when Diane came home late. I kissed her cheek when she left for work. I asked about her day and pretended to believe her answers. But behind the scenes, I was working with Gary and a divorce attorney named Laura Bennett. Laura was sharp mid-40s with a reputation for being ruthless in family court. When I showed her the evidence Gary had collected, she nodded approvingly and said, "We had a strong case." Gary continued his surveillance. He hacked into Diane's email with my permission and forwarded me everything. Dozens of messages between her and Stephen, planning meetups, exchanging flirtations, discussing how to keep their spouses from finding out. In one email, Stephen wrote, "I cannot wait to see you Thursday. Tell Carson you are working late again." Diane responded, "He does not suspect a thing." Reading those words was like swallowing glass. Laura advised me to document everything, keep copies of the emails, save the photos, record dates and times. She said when we went to court, we would present a timeline so detailed that Diane would have no defense. She also suggested I open a separate bank account and start moving assets quietly. Not to hide money, but to protect it. If Diane realized I knew she might try to drain our accounts or destroy evidence. I did everything Laura said. I transferred half our savings into an account in my name only. I made copies of all our financial documents. I contacted our mortgage company and put a freeze on any changes to our home loan. I even installed a hidden camera in our living room to document Diane's comings and goings. It felt dirty, like I was becoming someone I did not recognize. But I kept thinking about Lily. I had to protect her future. 3.5 weeks after I first saw those photos, I was ready. I had everything I needed for a divorce, but I had not anticipated what would happen next. I had not anticipated Patricia Lawson. It was Sunday morning. Diane, Lily, and I got dressed for church like we did every week. Lily wore her favorite yellow dress with the sunflowers. Diane wore a modest blue sundress and cardigan. I wore slacks and a button-down shirt. We drove to St. Mark's in silence. Diane stared out the window. I gripped the steering wheel. Lily sang a song from school in the back seat. We arrived at church, found our usual spot in the third row, and settled in. The service started. We stood to sing. The choir's voices filled the sanctuary. The sunlight through the stained glass painted colors across the pews. Everything was calm and holy, and then the doors slammed open. A woman I had never seen before stormed down the center aisle. She had brown hair pulled into a messy ponytail, her face red and blotchy from crying. She wore jeans and a sweater, completely underdressed for church. People turned to stare. The choir faltered, and then the woman's eyes locked on Diane. She lunged. She grabbed Diane by the hair and yanked her out of the pew. Diane screamed. Lily started crying. I stood up, instinct telling me to protect my wife. But then the woman shouted something that made me freeze. "You homewrecker! You destroyed my family!" Diane tried to fight back, tried to pry the woman's hands off her hair. "You are crazy, I do not know you," she screamed. But the woman did not stop. She pulled harder, dragging Diane into the aisle. The pastor and several men rushed forward to intervene, but the woman ignored them. She reached into her purse with her free hand and pulled out a stack of photographs. She threw them into the air, and they scattered across the floor like confetti. People picked them up. I saw their faces change from confusion to shock. I bent down and grabbed one. It was a photo of Diane and Stephen Lawson kissing. Another showed them holding hands. Another showed them entering a hotel together. The woman was sobbing now. 3 years, she screamed. He has been lying to me for 3 years because of her. I realized who she was, Patricia Lawson, Stephen's wife. The pastor and 2 other men finally managed to pull her away from Diane. She was still screaming, tears streaming down her face. "He chose her over me, over our children. How could you do this?" Diane stood there, her hair a mess, her face pale, lipstick smudged. She looked around at all the people staring at her, at the photos on the floor, at Patricia being dragged toward the exit. And then she looked at me. I stared back. I felt everyone's eyes on us. The whispers were already starting. Lily was crying in the pew, confused and scared. I bent down, picked her up, and held her close. Then I looked at Diane and asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Is it true?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her eyes filled with tears. That was all the answer I needed. I turned and walked out of the church with Lily in my arms. Behind me, I heard Diane calling my name. I did not look back. I drove Lily to our neighbor's house, a kind older woman named Margaret, who sometimes babysat. I told her there was an emergency and I needed her to watch Lily for a few hours. Margaret saw my face and did not ask questions. She just took Lily inside and closed the door. I drove home, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I walked into the house, Diane was already there, sitting on the couch with her head in her hands. She looked up when I entered, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "Carson, please," she started. "Let me explain." I did not say a word. I went to my office, opened my laptop, and pulled up the folder Gary had compiled. Then I connected my laptop to the television in the living room. I pressed play. Video after video, photo after photo, emails, text messages, a complete timeline of her affair with Stephen Lawson, 2 years' worth of lies. Diane stared at the screen, her face going from white to green. "How long have you known?" she whispered. I told her, 1 month. I had known for 1 month and said nothing. I had watched her lie to my face every single day. She started to cry, tried to explain. She said Stephen pursued her. She said she felt lonely. She said I was always working, always tired, always focused on Lily and never on her. She tried to make excuses, tried to shift blame. I cut her off. "Do not," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Just do not." I asked her how long. She hesitated, then admitted the truth. 2 years. The affair had been going on for 2 years. 2 years of her sneaking around, lying, betraying everything we built together. I felt like I was going to be sick. I told her to pack a bag and leave. She refused. She said this was her house too, her daughter, her life. I told her if she did not leave, I would call the police and show them the evidence of her trespassing on our shared property while conducting an affair. It was a bluff, but she did not know that. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. Maybe I had become someone new the moment I saw those photos. She went upstairs, threw some clothes in a suitcase, and left without another word. The next morning, I put my plan into action. I sent an email to Stephen Lawson's company, the CEO, the board of directors, human resources. The subject line read, "The truth about Stephen Lawson." In the email, I attached every photo, every message, every piece of evidence showing his affair with Diane. I explained that Stephen had been conducting an extramarital relationship with a colleague in the industry, violating the company's ethics policy. I did not do it out of spite. I did it because he deserved to face consequences, just like Diane was about to. Within 2 hours, I got a response from Stephen's company. They thanked me for bringing the matter to their attention and said they would investigate. By the end of the day, Stephen was fired. I found out later that Patricia filed for divorce immediately and was seeking full custody of their children, along with most of their assets. Stephen lost his job, his family, and his reputation in one day. I sent the same evidence to Diane's employer. Her boss called an emergency meeting. Diane was placed on suspension pending review. A week later, she was terminated for conduct unbecoming and damaging the company's reputation. Mutual friends received the evidence too. I was not trying to humiliate her publicly, but I needed people to know the truth. I needed them to understand why our marriage ended. Within days, everyone knew. Diane's phone blew up with angry messages from friends and family. Her mother called me crying, apologizing, saying she raised her daughter better than this. Then came the divorce proceedings. I filed with all the evidence Laura and I had compiled. Diane hired a lawyer and tried to fight for joint custody of Lily. But Laura was prepared. We presented evidence that Diane had neglected Lily during her affair. There were dates when she was supposed to pick Lily up from school, but was late because she was with Stephen. Times when she left Lily with a babysitter for hours claiming work obligations, when really she was at a hotel. Messages where she complained to Stephen about having to cancel plans because of her daughter. The judge was not impressed. In the end, I was granted full custody. Diane got supervised visitations twice a month. The house, the savings, the cars, everything went to me because Texas law allowed fault to influence asset division. Diane was left with her personal belongings and a court order to stay away from me, except during arranged visitation. She moved into a small apartment across town. Her career was in shambles, her reputation destroyed, her daughter essentially taken from her. I stood in the driveway the day she came to collect the last of her things. She loaded boxes into her car, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me one last time and said, "I am sorry." I did not respond. There was nothing left to say. She drove away and I walked back into the house that was now just mine and Lily's. The first few months after the divorce were brutal. I would wake up at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship and wondering where it went wrong. Had I missed earlier signs? Had I been a bad husband? Was there something I could have done differently? A therapist I started seeing told me those thoughts were normal, but ultimately unproductive. Diane made a choice. She chose to lie, to cheat, to betray. That was on her, not me. I threw myself into being a father. Lily was struggling too. She missed her mother and did not understand why she could not see her whenever she wanted. I tried to explain it in terms a 5-year-old could grasp. Mommy and Daddy were not going to live together anymore, but we both still loved her very much. Lily would cry at night sometimes, asking if it was her fault. I held her and promised her it had nothing to do with her, that she was the best thing in both our lives. Slowly we built a new routine, just the two of us. Saturday mornings were pancakes and cartoons, like always. I took her to the park, to the library, to her friends' houses for play dates. I learned to braid her hair even if it came out lopsided. I read her bedtime stories every night and stayed until she fell asleep. I made sure she knew she was loved, safe, and not alone. I also started reconnecting with parts of my life I had let slip during the marriage. I called up old friends I had not seen in years. I joined a cycling group that met on Sunday mornings. I started going to the gym, not because I wanted to look good, but because I needed an outlet for the anger and pain. One of the guys in the cycling group, a man named Marcus, had been through a similar situation 5 years earlier. He and I grabbed beers one night, and he told me his story. It helped to know I was not the only one who had been through this. As the months passed, something unexpected happened. I started to feel free. Free from the anxiety of wondering where Diane was. Free from the lies. Free from the constant tension in my own home. I could breathe again. I could sleep. I could laugh with Lily without feeling a weight on my chest. The house felt lighter somehow, even though it was just the two of us. Diane tried reaching out a few times. She sent texts apologizing, begging for another chance, saying she had made a terrible mistake. I never responded. Laura advised me to keep all communication through lawyers and only about Lily. I followed her advice. During supervised visitations, a court-appointed monitor was present. Diane would try to talk to me when I dropped Lily off, but I kept it brief and professional. I had nothing to say to her. One afternoon, about 8 months after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting on the back porch watching Lily play in the yard. She was chasing butterflies, laughing, her yellow dress fluttering in the breeze. And I realized something. I was okay. Not perfect, not healed completely, but okay. I had protected my daughter. I had stood up for myself. I had refused to let someone trample my dignity and get away with it. People asked me if I regretted going scorched earth on Diane and Stephen. They asked if I thought I had been too harsh, if maybe I should have handled it more quietly. My answer was always the same. No, I did not regret it. They made choices that hurt innocent people. Patricia and her children did not deserve what Stephen did. Lily did not deserve what Diane did. And I did not deserve to be lied to for 2 years. Actions have consequences. I simply made sure those consequences were real. The truth is, trust is fragile. It takes years to build and seconds to destroy. Once it is shattered, you can try to glue the pieces back together, but it will never be the same. There will always be cracks. I did not want to live in a marriage full of cracks, always wondering if my wife was lying, always second-guessing every word she said. That is no way to live. I learned that protecting yourself is not cruel, setting boundaries is not vindictive. Demanding honesty and loyalty in a relationship is not asking too much. And walking away from someone who cannot give you those things is not giving up. It is choosing yourself. It is choosing your peace. Lily is 7 now. She is doing well in school, has good friends, and still talks about her mother during visitations. I never badmouth Diane in front of Lily. Whatever anger I felt has cooled into something quieter. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. Diane is who she is. She made her choices. I made mine. I have not dated anyone seriously since the divorce. I am not in a rush. Maybe someday I will meet someone who values honesty and commitment the way I do. Or maybe I will just focus on raising Lily and building a life I can be proud of. Either way, I am okay with it. I do not need another person to complete me. I am complete on my own. Looking back, that Sunday morning at church feels like a lifetime ago. The moment Patricia Lawson grabbed Diane's hair and shouted the truth for everyone to hear. Part of me wishes it had not happened in front of Lily, that she had not had to see her mother exposed like that. But another part of me knows it was the catalyst I needed. It forced everything into the open. No more secrets, no more lies, just the raw, ugly truth. I burned Diane's life down, yes. But in doing so, I built my own backup. Stronger, more honest, more aligned with who I actually am and what I actually value. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. I made the hard choice, and I would make it again. So, let me ask you this. Have you ever had to make a choice between protecting yourself and keeping the peace? Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything? Drop a comment below and let me know your story. If this resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss future stories. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. And remember, you deserve honesty. You deserve loyalty. You deserve better than lies. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care of yourselves out there, and never settle for less than you are worth.